The night of the auction, the smell of smoke and rust filled the air. Chains clinked as the slaves were pushed forward, one by one, under the yellow lights of the market. The crowd shouted, laughed, and bargained like they were buying animals. In the corner, a giant woman kept her head down. Her silver hair fell across her face, hiding her sharp eyes. Her hands were cuffed with thick iron, and even those looked small compared to her wrists. She was taller than any man in the crowd, strong, broad, and powerful. But tonight, none of that mattered. The auctioneer grinned, pulling her forward. Here she is, folks. A rare one from the Titanis race. But his grin turned into a mocking smirk. Too big, too heavy, not breeding material. The crowd roared with laughter. Some shouted insults. Others shook their heads, already losing interest. On this planet, breeding potential was everything. A female who couldn't bear children was worth less than the chains on her wrists. The woman Lyra kept her head low. She'd learned long ago that speaking back only made things worse. She didn't want to be here. She didn't want to be anywhere. The auctioneer waved his hand. All right, let's start at 50 credits. Anyone? No? 40. From the shadows at the far end of the stage, a voice spoke. 100. The crowd fell silent. Heads turned, a human stepped forward, tall for his kind, but still small compared to Lyra. His dark hair was messy, his jacket dusty from travel. His eyes, however, were sharp and steady. The auctioneer laughed. 100. For her. Human. You must be new here. Us. She's useless for work, too big for most equipment. Useless for breeding. Us. Useless for, I'll pay 200, the human said, cutting him off. The crowd murmured. 200 was more than most fighters sold for. The auctioneer hesitated. All right then, 200, going once. Going twice, a voice in the back called, You're wasting your money, human. Laughter followed. The human didn't answer. His eyes never left Lyra's face. Sold. The auctioneer slammed his hand down on the crate beside him. Lyra felt the chain between her wrists tug as she was pulled forward. She still didn't understand. Why? Why would anyone pay so much for her? The guards unlocked her from the post and pushed her toward the human. She's yours now, one of them muttered. The human nodded, taking the chain gently, not yanking it like the others always did. My name's Cain, he said softly. Lyra didn't respond. She stared at him, confused. They walked away. From the noise of the market, the crowd's mocking voices fading behind them. The streets grew quieter, lit only by a few broken lamps. You're not going to ask? Cain finally said. Ask what? Her voice was low and rough, like she hadn't spoken in days. Why I bought you. Lyra looked away. I don't care. Cain stopped walking. I didn't buy you for what they think. I bought you because I couldn't stand seeing you there. She frowned. No one had ever said something like that to her. You don't know me? I don't have to, Cain said. Simply, I saw enough. They reached a small transport ship parked at the edge of the city. Cain opened the hatch and gestured for her to go inside. Inside, it was warm. Not much, just a single light, a bed in the corner, and a small table with a half-eaten meal. You can sit, Cain said, unfastening her chains. The metal clanged to the floor. She rubbed her wrists slowly, still not trusting him. What do you want from me? She asked. Nothing, Cain replied. He walked to a cupboard and pulled out a blanket. You're safe here. Safe. The word felt strange. She hadn't felt safe in years. But before she could speak again, Cain's come device beeped. He turned his back to her and answered. They'll come for her. A voice hissed through the speaker. You can't keep her. I'm not letting her go, Cain said firmly. There was a long pause. Then the voice replied, "Then you'd better be ready." The line went dead. Lyra's stomach tightened. Whoever they were coming, and soon. Cain looked at her, his jaw set. "Get some rest. Tomorrow, we run." She didn't know why, but for the first time in a long time, she felt something she thought was gone forever. Hope, the shelter of a human. The wind outside howled like an angry beast. Cain's small transport ship cut through the night sky, leaving the market lights far behind. Lyra sat in the corner, her huge frame making the space feel even smaller. She kept her arms folded across her chest, eyes locked on the floor. She didn't trust him. Not yet. Cain sat at the controls, quiet. The hum of the engine filled the air. Every now and then, he glanced at her, not with fear, not with disgust, but with something she didn't understand. When the ship finally landed, Lyra expected to see another cage, maybe a dark basement where he would keep her. Instead, Cain opened the hatch to a small wooden cabin, standing alone under the shadow of a mountain ridge. Snowflakes floated through the cold night air, landing on her silver hair. "This is it," Cain said. Stepping aside so she could enter. Inside, the warmth hit her first. A fire crackled in a stone fireplace. The smell of cooking meat drifted from the kitchen. A simple bed was pushed against one wall, and shelves lined with tools and books filled the other. Lyra froze. "You live here?" "For now," Cain said, hanging his jacket on a hook. "It's quiet. No one comes this far." She stayed. Near the door, her chains gone, but her guard still high. "What do you want from me?" Cain didn't answer right away. Instead, he took a pot from the fire and poured a bowl of stew. He placed it on the table and pushed it toward her. "Eat." Her stomach growled, but she didn't move. "It's not poisoned," Cain said with a faint smile. Lyra slowly sat down, the chair creaking under her weight. She took a cautious sip. Warmth spread through her chest. It had been days, maybe weeks, since she'd had real food. Cain leaned back in his chair. "I know what they said about you. At the auction, her jaw tightened. They weren't lying. I'm not. What your kind looks for. I'm not breeding material." Cain shrugged. "Good. I wasn't looking for that." She looked up sharply. "Then why?" He met her eyes. "Because you were alone? 'Cause I know what it's like when the whole galaxy decides your worth." Nothing. For a moment, neither spoke. The fire popped and hissed. Finally, Lyra said, "You don't know me. You don't know what I've done." Cain's gaze didn't waver. "And you don't know me? But we've got time." She wanted to ask more, but a low, distant hum cut through the night. Lyra stiffened. Cain was already on his feet, pulling. A scanner from the wall. His face darkened. Patrol drones. Too close. Lyra's heart pounded. "They're here for me." "Maybe? Maybe they're just passing," Cain said, though his voice made it clear he didn't believe it. "Either way, we stay inside tonight." The drones passed overhead, their red searchlights sweeping the snow. Lyra watched from the small window, her breath fogging the glass. Cain stood beside her, hand resting on a holstered weapon. After a tense minute, the hum faded. The drones were gone. Cain exhaled slowly. "We're not safe here forever, but we've got time to rest." Lyra turned to him. "Why risk this? Why risk your life for me?" Cain hesitated, then said quietly, "Because I've seen enough people thrown away by the galaxy. I'm not letting it happen to you." She searched his face for a lie, but found none. Later, she lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling. Cain had taken the floor, wrapped in a thin blanket, his breathing steady. The fire's glow flickered across the walls. She didn't sleep. Not really. Too many years of running, too many nights expecting betrayal. But in the silence of the cabin, with the snow falling outside, she realized something strange. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't thinking about escape. She was thinking about why he had chosen her. But before dawn, she got her answer. A sharp knock rattled the door. Cain was on his feet instantly, weapon in hand. He looked at her, voice low. "Stay here." The knock came again, harder this time. Cain opened the door just a crack. A shadow stood outside, tall, armored, with a glowing red visor. "I know what you're hiding, human," the voice growled. "The Titanis woman belongs to my employer. Give her up, and I walk away. Refuse, and I burn this place to the ground." Cain didn't blink. "You'll have to go through me." The armored figure leaned forward. "Then you won't live to see sunrise." The hunters arrived. The armored figure outside didn't wait for Cain's answer. A low whistle escaped from under the helmet, a signal. From the darkness of the snow-covered trees, shapes began to appear. 5, 6, maybe more. Each wore dark armor with glowing red eyes, moving with silent, deadly precision. Lyra's chest tightened. She knew those movements, bounty hunters. The kind who didn't stop until their target was either captured or dead. Cain shut the door with a heavy thud and locked it. "We have to move." Now, Lyra stepped back. "You can't fight that many." "Not planning to fight them all," Cain said, strapping on a utility belt. "But if we run now, they'll track us. We need to buy time." Before she could answer, a deep, metallic voice boomed from outside. "Titanis female, surrender yourself. Your human will be spared." Lyra's fists clenched. She'd heard that promise before. It was always a lie. Cain looked at her. "Do you trust me?" She hesitated. "I don't know." "Then decide fast," Cain said, tossing her a heavy fur cloak. "Back door. Move." They slipped out into the icy night, the snow crunching softly under their boots. The moonlight made everything glow silver. The mountain loomed above, jagged and cold. From the front of the cabin came a crash. The hunters had broken in. Cain led her uphill through a narrow path. His breath came in short, sharp bursts. Lyra followed close, behind her long strides making less noise than his shorter steps. A beam of red light cut through the trees ahead. Cain froze, pulling her behind a boulder. A drone hovered past, scanning the ground with a thin blue laser. When it passed, Cain motioned her forward. But before they could move, a sharp voice called out from behind them. "Stop running." They turned. A hunter stood on the path, weapon raised. The glowing barrel hummed, ready to fire. "Don't," Cain said, stepping between the hunter and Lyra. "You think you can protect her?" The hunter said. "Do you know how much she's worth? The galaxy doesn't want her alive. They want her as proof. Proof the Titanis are done." Cain's jaw tightened. "I don't care." The hunter fired. Cain dove aside, pulling Lyra with him. The energy blast hit the rock wall, sending sparks and shards of ice into the air. Lyra's instincts took over. She lunged forward, grabbing the hunter's arm. Even with his armor, her strength was too much. She twisted, and the weapon clattered into the snow. With a single shove, she sent him crashing into a drift, gasping for air. "Move," Cain shouted, grabbing the weapon. They ran again, deeper into the mountain pass. But the sounds behind them grew louder, metal boots pounding against frozen earth. Shouts in the hunter's harsh language. "They're closing in," Lyra said, glancing back. "Good," Cain replied. She frowned. "Good," he pointed ahead. "A narrow cliffside ledge. They follow us there, they can't surround us." They reached the ledge just as the first hunter rounded the bend. Cain fired the stolen weapon, forcing them to take cover. The blasts lit up the night like lightning, each one echoing across the mountain. Lyra stood beside him, scanning the shadows. More hunters appeared, their glowing visors like red stars in the dark. "This won't hold," she said. "It doesn't have to," Cain replied, pressing a small device into her hand. "When I say, throw this into their line." She looked at it, a smooth black sphere with a blinking blue light. "What is it?" "Trust me." The hunters advanced, their boots crunching closer. Cain's weapon hissed, almost out of power. "Now," he shouted. Lyra hurled the sphere with all her strength. It landed in the snow between the hunters, blinking faster. Then light. A blinding flash lit the entire pass, followed by a wave of sound that shook the ground. The hunters cried out, clutching their helmets. Cain grabbed her arm. "Go!" They ran through the confusion, turning sharply into a hidden crevice in the cliff. The narrow space forced them to crawl, the rock cold against their hands. Finally, they emerged into a sheltered hollow, a cave hidden by thick icicles. Cain dropped into the snow, breathing hard. Lyra stared at him. "You planned this?" "Not exactly," Cain admitted, smiling faintly. "But I knew the mountains might give us a chance." She looked back toward the crevice. No sounds followed. The hunters had lost them. For now, Cain leaned against the wall, his eyes meeting hers. "You could have left me back there." She didn't answer right away. Then she said, "I'm not sure why, but I didn't want to." For the first time, Cain saw something new in her expression. Not fear, not suspicion. Something closer to trust. But deep in the mountain pass, a low, distant hum began to rise. Again, the hunters were regrouping, and they weren't done yet. The mountain refuge, the cave, was dark except for the faint blue glow of ice reflecting the moonlight outside. Cain set down his pack and scanned the walls with a small handheld light. "It's deep enough. They won't spot us here tonight." Lyra stepped inside slowly, her head almost brushing the ceiling. Her breath formed small clouds in the cold air. She glanced toward the narrow entrance they had crawled through. "They'll find the trail." "Maybe," Cain admitted, pulling a small metal device from his pocket. He pressed a button, and a soft pulse of static filled the air. "Signal jammer. They're tracking you by cum or implant. This will make it harder." She watched him work, her large hands curling around her cloak. "You came prepared for more than a rescue." Cain didn't look up. "I came prepared for a fight." They both stayed quiet for a moment, listening to the faint whistle of wind outside. Finally, Cain lit a small portable heater and set it between them. Warmth spread slowly, not much, but enough to thaw their fingers. Lyra sat against the wall, knees drawn up. "I don't understand you, human." Cain raised an eyebrow. "Because I'm helping you? It's because you're risking yourself," she said. "I'm not worth this." Cain's gaze was steady. "That's for me to decide." Her jaw tightened. "Do you know why they call me useless?" "Yes," Cain said quietly. The auctioneer made it very clear. "They didn't lie," Lyra said, voice sharp. "Titanis females are supposed to bring strong offspring. My bloodline failed. I can't." She stared at the heater like it might judge her. "I was taken from my people because I had no value." Cain leaned forward, resting his arms on his knees. "Value isn't decided by what you can give someone else. It's decided by what you are." Her eyes flicked to him. "And what am I?" "A fighter," Cain said without hesitation. "I saw it when you threw that hunter like he was a child's toy. And I've seen it every moment since." She didn't answer. But in the dim light, her shoulders lowered just a little. A sudden sound cut through the moment, a deep, rumbling growl. Lyra froze. Cain reached for his weapon. From the shadows at the far end of the cave, two pale eyes appeared. Then the shape stepped into the glow. A mountain beast. Its fur white and thick, its claws clicking against the stone. It was taller than Cain, but smaller than Lyra. and its long fangs glistened. "Don't move," Cain whispered. The beast sniffed the air, stepping closer. Lyra's muscles tensed. Cain slowly lifted his weapon, but she caught his arm. "No," she whispered. "It's territorial. If you shoot, others might come." Then Lyra stood slowly, towering over the beast. She spread her arms wide and made a low rumbling sound deep in her chest. The beast paused, its head tilting. She took one step forward, keeping her eyes locked on it. The beast gave a short huff, then backed away into the shadows. The sound of its claws faded until there was only silence again. Cain exhaled. That was impressive. Lyra sat back down, her expression calm. "Where I come from, you learn to speak without words. Some animals understand dominance. I'm starting to think you've got more than a fighter in you," Cain said with a faint smile. For the first time since they met, Lyra almost smiled back. Almost hours passed. Outside, the wind howled and snow fell harder, sealing them in. Deeper. Cain cleaned his weapon in the corner while Lyra watched the firelight flicker on the ice walls. "Why did you leave your homeworld?" she asked suddenly. Cain didn't look up from his work. "Because warlords took it from me. My family didn't make it out." Lyra was silent for a moment. "I'm sorry," he shrugged. "That's why I couldn't leave you there. I know what it's like to be taken, to have your worth decided by someone else." She studied him for a long time. "You're strange, Cain." "Most people say that," he said with a small laugh. A faint hum interrupted them, distant but growing. Lyra's eyes narrowed. Drones. Cain moved to the entrance and peered out. Through the curtain of snow, faint red lights blinked in the distance, weaving through the trees far below. "They're still searching," Cain said. "We can't stay long." Lyra pulled her cloak tighter. "Then where?" "Higher," Cain said, turning back. "If we reach the old ridge tunnels, we can cross into the next valley. It'll slow them down." She gave a short nod. "Then we move at first light." They sat in silence again, the snowstorm roaring like an ocean outside. For the first time, Lyra wasn't just thinking about survival. She was thinking about what Cain had said, value wasn't about what you could give, but what you were. She wasn't ready to believe it yet. But something in his voice had made her want to try. The choice snow crunched under Lyra's boots as she followed Cain through the narrow mountain path. The morning was bitter cold, the kind that stung the skin with every breath. Frost clung to her hair, and her cloak was heavy with ice. They had left the cave before sunrise, climbing higher toward the ridge tunnels Cain had mentioned. The storm had passed, but the silence felt heavy, as if the mountains were holding their breath. Lyra's eyes scanned the slopes below. "I don't see them." "They're there," Cain said quietly. "Hunters don't give up," they pressed on, boots slipping on frozen stone. The path curved along a cliffside, where one wrong step meant a fall into a deep gorge dot. Then the sound, a sharp metallic whine, followed by a thud. Snow burst upward just behind them, scattering like glass. Cain shoved her forward. "Go." Energy blasts lit the air. Hunters emerged from the trees below, climbing fast. Their armor glinted in the pale sun, red visors glowing like embers. Lyra turned to fight, but Cain pulled her along. "Not here, too exposed." They sprinted along the ledge until it opened into a wide plateau of frozen ground. It should have felt safer. But it didn't. That's when she saw them. More hunters, a full squad, waiting ahead. They'd been herded here like prey. The leader stepped forward, visor reflecting the bright snow. His voice was deep and cold. "Titanis female surrender, and your human lives. Refuse, and you both die." Lyra froze. Her breath came in short bursts. She could fight. She could try to break through. But Cain was smaller, slower, if she stayed, he'd be caught in the crossfire. She looked at him. His hand rested on his weapon, but his eyes were calm. "Don't," he said softly. The leader took a step closer. "You know the truth, Titanis. You are worth nothing to him. You can't give him a future. You can't give anyone a future. Let him go, and your suffering ends." The words hit like cold knives. They were the same words she'd heard from slavers, from scientists, from every sneering mouth that had ever judged her. She looked at Cain again. He shook his head. "Don't listen to them." Behind them, the first group of hunters had caught up. They were surrounded. Her fingers curled into fists. She could walk forward now, give herself up, and Cain might live. Or she could fight. And both of them might die. The leader raised his weapon. Choose. Lyra's mind raced. She remembered the auction. The way Cain had stepped forward when no one else did. The way he had told her she was more than they said. Her chest tightened. Choice made, she stepped in front of Cain, her massive frame shielding him. "You want me? Come take me." Before the leader could react, she charged. Snow exploded under her feet as she slammed into him, sending him flying backward into two of his soldiers. Cain opened fire, blasts lighting the air as hunters scattered. The first group tried to rush them from behind. But Lyra spun, grabbing one by the arm and hurling him over the cliff. Another lunged at Cain, and Lyra's hand closed around his neck, lifting him off the ground before tossing him into the others. "Cain," she shouted, pointing toward a narrow rock gap on the far side of the plateau. There, he didn't argue. They fought their way toward it, Cain covering her with precise bursts of fire while she kept the hunters at a distance with sheer force. A blast scorched the snow by Cain's leg. A T stumbled. One of the hunters closed in, weapon raised for the kill, but Lyra was faster. She slammed into him with her shoulder, knocking the weapon away and sending him sprawling. They reached the gap, ducking inside just as more blasts sizzled against the rock. Cain dropped to one knee, catching his breath. "You could have left me," he said, voice hoarse. Lyra looked at him, her chest rising and falling. "I'm done running from who I am. And I'm done letting them decide my worth." Cain gave a tired smile. "Remind me never to doubt you again." Behind them, angry shouts echoed off the stone walls. The hunters were regrouping. Cain reloaded his weapon, but Lyra put a hand on his shoulder. "They won't stop," she said. "Not until one of us is gone." "Then we make sure it's them," Cain replied. They moved deeper into the narrow path, the sounds of pursuit following them. Lyra's heart was still pounding, but it wasn't fear this time. It was something sharper, stronger. For the first time in her life, she had chosen to fight for someone else, and it felt like freedom. The truth in the storm. The first snowflake fell just as they cleared the ridge. By the time they reached the high pass, the sky had turned to a swirling wall of white. Wind howled through the rocks, throwing icy shards into their faces. Cain leaned into the storm, one hand on the cliff wall to keep his balance. "We have to find shelter before night," he shouted over the wind. Lyra trudged behind him, each step sinking deep into the snow. Even with her size and strength, the cold bit into her bones. The narrow path twisted along a drop so steep she couldn't see the bottom through the blur of white. Cain spotted a break in the cliffside, a shadow that could mean a cave. "There," he pointed. They fought their way across the slope, nearly slipping twice. The entrance was just big enough for Lyra to squeeze through. Inside, the cave was dark, but at least it cut off the wind. Cain set down his pack and pulled out a small lantern. Warm light spread across damp stone walls, revealing a low ceiling and a floor dusted with frost. Lyra sank down against the wall, her breath heavy clouds in the cold air. Cain knelt beside her. "Are you all right?" She nodded. but didn't look. At him. "You're shaking," he said. Here, he pulled off his jacket and draped it over her shoulders. She frowned. "You'll freeze." "I've been through worse," he said with a small smile. For a moment, there was only the sound of the wind outside. Then Lyra spoke, her voice quiet. "Cain, even if I wanted to, I can't give you a family. I can't give anyone a child." Cain froze, caught off guard by the sudden confession. "Lyra, it's the truth," she cut in. "That's why they took me from my people. Why they sold me. I'm not complete. Not like others." Her voice cracked, but her eyes stayed, hard, as if daring him to agree. Cain's gaze softened. "I didn't save you because of what you could give me. I saved you because you're worth saving." She shook her head. "You don't understand. In my culture, a Titanis female's worth is in her bloodline. I'm broken." "Then your culture is wrong," Cain said, his voice firm. "You're strong, brave, smarter than anyone I've met out here." And his eyes softened. "You've kept me alive more than once." For a long moment, they just looked at each other. The storm outside roared like it wanted to tear the mountain apart, but inside the small cave, there was only the steady sound of their breathing. Lyra's eyes dropped. "No one's ever said that to me." "Then they're all blind," Cain replied. The wind whistled through a crack in the stone, making the lantern flicker. Cain moved closer to adjust it, and for a second their hands brushed. Lyra didn't pull away. She let out a quiet breath. "You're strange human. I'll take that as a compliment," Cain said, a small smile touching his lips. Outside, the storm worsened. Snow piled against the entrance, sealing them in. Cain checked the time on his wrist device. "We're stuck here until morning." Lyra tilted her head. "You've been in storms like this before?" "Once," Cain said, his eyes distant. "On a frozen moon during the war. Lost half my squad to the cold before the enemy even found us." Lyra's chest tightened. "And you stayed out here for me anyway?" "I told you," Cain said quietly. "You were worth it." For a while, they sat in silence, the lantern casting soft shadows across the cave walls. The warmth from Cain's jacket and the closeness between them began to cut through the chill. Then a deep rumble shook the ground beneath them. Lyra tensed. "Avalanche." Cain shook his head. "No, that's engines." They moved to the entrance and brushed away some of the snow. Through the storm's white curtain, faint red lights moved across the slope below. Hunter craft, too. Of them, their search beams slicing through the night. "They're still tracking us," Cain said, his voice low. "They won't stop," Lyra murmured. "Not until I'm back in chains." Cain's jaw tightened. "Then we make sure that never happens." She looked at him, seeing no hesitation in his eyes. Not pity, not fear. Just certainty. Something inside her shifted. The voice that had always told her she was worthless felt quieter. As the storm raged outside, Lyra leaned back against the wall, her massive frame close enough to feel the steady warmth of Cain beside her. For the first time in years, she didn't feel alone, and somewhere deep inside, a tiny spark, something she thought was gone forever, began to flicker to life. A new beginning. The mountains were quiet now. The storm had passed days ago, leaving the peaks coated in fresh snow that glittered under the pale morning sun. The hunters had vanished from the skies, no red lights in sight, for the first time in weeks. Cain and Lyra could walk without checking over their shoulders every few seconds. They had made it to a small, hidden valley Cain had once used as a supply drop during the war. An abandoned cabin stood there, half buried in snow, but sturdy enough to live in. Smoke now curled from its chimney, and the sound of tools clinking came from outside as Cain worked to fix the roof. Inside, Lyra stood by the window, one hand resting over her stomach. She didn't know why she kept touching the same spot lately. It wasn't pain. It was something else. Something new. Kane came in, brushing snow from his jacket. Roof's holding. We'll be safe here until I figure our next move. Lyra turned toward him. And then. Wherever we want, he said with a faint smile. The galaxy's big enough to hide from anyone. She looked at him for a long moment before saying, "What if I don't want to hide anymore?" Kane froze, then set down his tools. "Then we fight." There was no hesitation in his voice. No doubt, Lyra's eyes softened, but before she could answer, a wave of dizziness hit her. She gripped the table for balance. Kane was at her side instantly. "What's wrong?" "I don't know," she admitted. "I felt strange for days." He guided her to sit down. "Strange how?" She hesitated, unsure how to explain. "Warm, tired, like my body's different." Kane studied her, then dug through his pack until he pulled out a small medical scanner. "Hold still." She raised an eyebrow, but stayed still as he passed the device over her. The scanner beeped. Once, then again, then gave a series of rapid tones. Kane looked at the screen and froze. His eyes widened. "Lyra, you're what?" she demanded. "You're pregnant." The words hit her like a physical blow. She stared at him, her mind scrambling. No, that's not possible. "They told me," her voice cracked. "They told me I couldn't." Kane knelt in front of her, his eyes locked on hers. They were wrong. For a moment, the world went silent except for her heartbeat. She felt the weight of every year she had been told she was broken. Every cruel word, every mocking laugh, every label they had forced on her. Her throat tightened. "I don't understand." Kane took her massive hand in his. "You don't have to. All you need to know is, you're not broken. You never were." Tears burned her eyes before she could stop them. She had never cried in front of anyone. But now, with Kane's hand holding hers, she let them fall. He smiled softly. "We'll protect this child, no matter what comes." Lyra swallowed hard. "They'll come for us again when they find out." "Then they'll find two people ready to fight," Kane said, his voice steady. "And we won't be fighting just for survival anymore. We'll be fighting for our family." The word family felt strange and warm on her tongue. That night, they sat together by the fire, the shadows dancing on the walls. Kane planned their defenses, talking about routes and supply caches. Lyra listened, but her hand kept drifting to her stomach, feeling the life growing inside her. In her mind, she saw the child tall and strong like her, clever and fierce like him. A child who would never hear the lies she had lived with. Later, when the fire had burned low, Kane spoke quietly. "Do you remember what they said at the auction? About you being too big, too heavy, too useless?" She gave a faint nod. Kane's eyes met hers, fierce and certain. "They were wrong about every single thing. To me, you've always been just right." The words sank into her like warmth in the cold. She realized then that this, not the cabin, not the valley, was home. Kane was home. The wind outside whispered through the trees, but it no longer sounded like a warning. It sounded like a promise. Tomorrow, they would start preparing for whatever came next. Tomorrow, the fight would begin again. But tonight, they rested together, and for the first time in her life, Lyra didn't feel like she was waiting for the worst. She felt like she was waiting for a future.